And we are on to module 6, so welcome. At this point, we've covered the basics of getting your business set up. So we've covered your positioning, client acquisition and LinkedIn strategies, handling sales calls and closing deals, as well as onboarding. So this module is all about running the business that you've started. I'll be covering systems for running your business, time management, additional mindset shifts, as well as future planning and how to do all of this without burning out, because that is the goal. All right, so starting with systems. In my opinion, the key to running a sustainable freelance business without burning out comes down to having systems that you can rely on. One, this makes the day-to-day so much more streamlined. And two, you can then reserve your brain power for coming up with really awesome client strategies and further growing your business. With that in mind, I recommend having a structured approach for both your client activities as well as your business activities. And I don't want to get too prescriptive here because everyone has a different style and way of working that works for them. But I do recommend having a regular cadence of activities that you adhere to. It just makes sure that you're being consistent and you're not missing anything important. Nothing is slipping through the cracks. And if you have an agency background, you likely have a really good head start here. And if you don't have an agency background, then examples might be really helpful. So I'll outline those in the next slide. Starting with my current business processes that are client-centered. Every morning, I do a budget pacing check-in for all of my client accounts. And this also doubles as a performance check-in as well. And in my opinion, this is a great example of mastery of the basics, because it doesn't matter if you have like the coolest strategies or you're testing the latest ideas. If you're over or underspending your client's budget, then you're missing the mark, regardless of like how great your ideas are. Moving on to weekly activities. So I will do weekly reporting on Mondays. This entails sending the client their dashboard that I created in Reporting Ninja and providing insights and next steps over email. And then in terms of weekly optimizations, I'll try to knock those out on Mondays and Tuesdays. I like doing that early in the week, but I'll take care of anything that surfaced in the report as well as just regular performance optimizations. And then I'll also have call decks and strategy calls with clients. I try to have these on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and then I'll knock out my remaining client work on Thursdays and Fridays and reserve any deep work tasks like research projects for these days, since they intentionally don't have recurring client calls. And I'll try to complete or at least get started on any next steps that I have coming out of the client calls that occurred earlier in the week. And then Fridays, I like to plan for the week ahead and make sure that everything is scheduled out in Asana. This just helps me feel more organized come Monday morning. I'm not like scrambling to figure out what I have going on. I know what I'm getting into come Monday. And then monthly activities, I'll also send out monthly reports on the first business day of the month. And these reports have the exact same layout as the weekly reports. It's just looking back at the month prior. And then I'll also plan for the month ahead. So I'll usually do this on a Thursday or Friday near the end of the month. Then I have my process for working on the business, not just in it. So daily, I'll record my stats from my LinkedIn post from the previous day and respond to any comments or DMs. This really doesn't take me very long. It's just something that I knock out early in the morning. And then at the weekly level, since my Thursdays and Fridays don't usually have recurring client calls, I like to use these days to also work on content for the week ahead. So like I mentioned, for the client activities, I'll have deep work days on Thursdays and Fridays. And so that will also include content for both my Substack and my LinkedIn content. I'll also map out plans for the business on these days as well. And then on Fridays, I also have education/learning time. This was really important to me when I was setting up my freelance business. I have a recurring time block every Friday. It's just a general open time for learning that I stick to every week. And then on the first business day of the month, I send out invoices. And when each invoice is paid, I log it in my revenue and business expense tracker. I will also move money for taxes into my savings account that I use to pay my quarterly taxes. And then speaking of quarterly, I pay taxes every quarter. That's one of the big quarterly cadence activities. I also set quarterly goals for myself. This includes a focus area of my business that I would just like to devote more time to. It also helps inform a general content strategy for the quarter ahead. For example, Q2 2025, this Q2, was all about this course. So I went into it knowing I would spend more time on the course than I would acquiring new PPC clients or trying to get more coaching clients. And then I'll schedule tactical next steps as well as more general long-term goals in Asana. Because I check Asana every day, I'm fully aware of what I have coming up. And there's a specific day to do those tasks. And a tip for naming your task is for every task you have, put a verb at the start. So build X campaign, pay Q2 taxes, send monthly invoices. I found that starting with a verb, starting with an action, gets me moving more than just the thing that needs done. So, pay Q2 taxes is much more like get up and go than, say, for example, Q2 taxes. And an important note here that I wanted to highlight is that these activities will change over time as both you and your business evolves. Activities that you once thought were really important and necessary may not hold the same weight a year from now. So I recommend just focusing on where you're at and observe when activities or a certain process is no longer serving you as it once did, then make changes from there. And I also have some rules that I try not to break. So first being that I try not to have client meetings on Mondays or Fridays. This usually doesn't get broken because my clients also don't want to have meetings on Mondays or Fridays, so it works out. I also don't like having meetings in the morning. I don't want to feel like super rushed at the start of my day. So I prefer to focus on work in the morning when my brain is fresh and I'm building, writing, more solitary. And then I'll have meetings in the afternoon. So the earliest that I usually propose a meeting is 11 a.m. If a client needs to reschedule to 9 a.m. the following day, I'm not going to tell them no. But in terms of times that I offer my availability, I try to work with how my brain works best. My next rule is that I have to work on the business, not just in it, at least one day a week. It doesn't have to be the whole day, but I do need to devote some time to it per week. And I also keep a promise to myself to post on LinkedIn at least 3 times a week. I consider content as part of my business strategy, so I tend not to break this rule unless I'm, sick or something crazy comes up. But usually I'm able to adhere to at least 3 posts a week. I also prioritize catching up with other freelancers and folks that I enjoy talking to at least once per month. Some months are busier than others and I'm not able to get it done. But overall, I found that it just keeps me sane and it's really nice to talk to other people. And then lastly, I talk to every client at least once per week. This can be an email, a quick Slack message, or a call. It doesn't really matter, but I do try to have at least one touch point per week. Now, let's talk about helpful tools for running your freelance business. So I've mentioned these throughout the course, but I wanted to outline them all in one place. These are tools that help me stay organized and on top of everything and able to run my business. Starting with Asana. I have talked about them a bunch of times now, but you can use any task management system that will help you keep track of both your client to-dos and your business to-dos. And some additional tools that I've put here that are super crucial for running my business: QuickBooks, invoicing software, Notion. I've got the free plan. I use Google Sheets and Docs for literally everything. Calendly, I use this so people can book time for one-on-one consulting or coaching. ChatGPT, I used the free version for a really, really long time before I upgraded to their paid tier. So that's $20 a month. And then I use SpyFu for competitor research. This is more PPC specific and not really business specific, but wanted to include here because I use it quite a bit. And then Reporting Ninja, like I've mentioned them a bunch of times, I use them for reporting and it's about $20 per month. And a note about keeping things simple. You'll notice that I don't have a crazy advanced or expensive tech stack. I prefer to keep my business simple. And because of that, I don't need a ton of fancy tools that cost a lot of money. I don't like to just add a bunch of tools because they're cool or they're fun or it's the hot new thing. I like for there to be a reason and a purpose behind it. All right, so that is a good stopping place for this lesson before we move on to the next lesson, which is all about managing multiple clients. So, action items for this lesson: first, create a doc for yourself that outlines processes for both your clients and your business. Think of recurring weekly, monthly, quarterly activities for both your clients and your business. And with that, feel free to go back through this lesson. You can also copy mine, but have a doc somewhere where you can reference these activities. And better yet, if you already have clients and a business, then schedule these items in a task management system and add recurring due dates based on the cadence of the activity. And second action item, declare some rules for yourself. This is similar to your non-negotiables that we talked about all the way back in module 1, but this time it's more specific to how you best structure your day and your week. And then the last item here is less of an action item and more of a tip, is just start small when it comes to tools for your business. You don't want to add too much all at once. Once you knock out these next steps, I will meet you over in lesson 2, where we'll talk all about managing multiple clients. So I'll see you over there.